When a soil is performing well, soil aggregates are actually very stable in water. They're very resistant to erosion. They're resistant from breaking apart into their smallest particles and releasing those nutrients into the water column and clouding up the water and making muddy water and losing our nutrients down the stream. So the Slate test does a really good job as we just use these soils, drop them into water, see how well they can take the water rushing into the pore space. Okay, so we've air dried. These are actual samples. A lot of these from here in Illinois. I brought a couple of my own pore soils from Indiana, so we can try those. But we need to know how well soil reacts to water, because everything about soil function depends on its ability to meter and to manage water for us. Water needs to be able to go in when it rains. We need every raindrop, wherever it lands, it needs to go into the soil right there. And if it goes in there, we need to have enough pore space and enough strength of that pore space, what we call aggregate stability, to hold on to that water longer through the season, not just let it bleed right on through. Okay? So everything about this test is very important for understanding if your soil has good aggregate stability. And we're going to use that word. That's a word that needs to roll off your tongue. You need to understand what aggregate stability is. So I've got these soils laid out, and all of the demonstrations, I hope I did this right. To your right is a system that is at least 5 to 6 years of no-till, continuous or strip-till, and has had some history of a cover crop on there. And the reason that we have that is that lack of disturbance and the addition of the living root on a regular basis produces a biological habitat that will then release many of the glues that actually hold soils together. Either the root exudates, produce those glues, or the biological organisms that live in the soil also produce essentially glues, polysaccharides, proteins, those things that glue those soil particles together. So on your right, when we're comparing these, we'll compare one with long-term no-till plus cover crops to one that's more conventional tillage, okay, of the same soil type. If you look on a soil map, they're the same soil series. The only difference is management. So as we go across these, I'll describe them, and we'll start here with the Illinois soil right up the road where we're going to be visiting. A very common, this is a Sabra soil that the first one has been under no-till. Here, we'll drop these in at the same time if you can. And we not that one. Go ahead and drop these two first. Oh, yeah. It's hard to find. And so when we drop them in, we'll just take a look at what happens to these soils and see if there's a difference as we look at these. Go ahead, just kind of drop them in there. Okay? And so there's a pretty dramatic difference in how these soils perform in water right out of the gate. You'll notice that even the particles, there's always going to be in a healthy soil some particles slake off. But those particles, if you really come up here and look closely, they're still in a stable aggregate. It's just a smaller stable aggregate. If you look at the bottom, that still looks more like cake. Where the aggregates aren't stable, it breaks apart to the smallest mineral portion of the soil. And when they land at the bottom, it looks more like peanut butter. These are the same exact soil. The only difference is management, okay? So let's take this one. This one's kind of a fluke. I brought this from Indiana. I just wanted to show a contrast. It'll be a well. Because we'll talk later about inherent soil quality versus not so inherent soil quality. This soil was mapped in 1972 as severely eroded. Okay, so in 1972 in Indiana, this Miami soil was mapped as severely eroded. So go ahead and stick that one in there too. We'll take a look at and see how that performs. Now, This soil is so degraded that if I pulled that out of there now, you'll find water's not even going in it. It's more like rock. So it's going to take a while to even get any water in that soil because it's like rock. But once it gets in there, you'll see that it has zero integrity from an aggregate stability standpoint. So we'll watch that one throughout the day. Once it finally gets water in it, it's gonna change rapidly. Now, this is Saybrook, which is pretty good soil. The next two are Drummer. Drummer's like the Cadillac of all soils across the Corn Belt, is what everybody wants, right? So let's drop those two in there and look. These are inherently some of the best soils in all of Illinois. Okay? So we'll drop those in there. Now, a soil that's inherently that good, you'd think you'd be able to manage it however you want, and it would just hold up, right? Okay? Well, it's going to fall apart into some aggregates, but notice how the water does not even cloud up. The mineral portion of that soil is staying in those water-stable aggregates as it falls to the bottom. A soil that's this good, a Drummer Silt Loam, should always be able to withstand the forces of water. But you can kind of see that I'm going to suggest that this is the most typical state of condition of our soils across most of northern Indiana and Illinois and throughout Iowa and most of the Corn Belt is in this condition. Inherently very, very good soils, however, are not able to withstand the forces of water very well. We define these are conservation tillage. It's not being moldboard plowed, right? It's being chisel plowed and probably one or two passes maybe in the spring, something. Not what you'd call hardcore tillage, but minimal tillage. And then I'll bring...
And Barry, the thing that got me when I first saw these several years ago, that is simply the water soaking in to those pedons. It's not rain pounding on the surface of the soil. It's not, overland flow running across. Those physical pressures on the soil are going to be so much greater than what's occurring right here. That is just simply the water soaking in has the power to dislodge those soil particles, that individual sand, silt, and clay, because there's nothing there to hold it together.
Right, and even when the water's soaking in so slowly, like on this one, I mean, it's barely able to get it. And this one was taken from a field that had quite a bit of roots and had a growing plant on it. So the roots itself should hold that together pretty well. But even there, it's not able to take it. So here's two final ones we'll show, and I just brought these from Indiana just as an example. Again, side by side, you can tell a little bit of difference in the organic matter and the color. It just looks a little different. Same management though, long-term no-till plus conventional tillage. And actually this is minimum tillage. I'll just go ahead and drop these in there too. Same thing. And we'll just so it really, I've done this across just about every soil type and every climate zone and every possible scenario, and seldom does this test not speak volumes as to what the differences management can make to your soil. And so as we look at this, anytime you see cloudy water, what's attached to that suspended clay particle? Nutrients. And even on very, very flat soil, even on very flat slopes, if we get a 2-inch rain and our soil is in this condition, and when you get a chance, come up here and look what's floating on the surface of this. You're foamy. Lots of nutrient in this. It sets you almost like you put soap, dishwater, Once these stay in suspended for a long time, even on very flat soils, if the soil can't take the water in where the raindrop lands, even on flat soils, it goes to where? A ponded area, right? What's in that ponded area across our agricultural landscape? What do we have located there? All okay, or a tile. So if all of your nutrients are in this cloudy water, it makes its way, and this will stay suspended if we left these up for 48 hours, it'd probably still be cloudy in 48 hours. It's gonna find its way to that low area, and then it's gonna leave, and once it gets to the tile, what kind of filtration opportunities does it have? And that's where our customers have a problem with us right now. Okay, so that's why we're getting some fingers pointed at us. But we as producers, we don't want those nutrients to leave anyway, right? We bought them. The last thing we want is for those to leave. We want them to be held in a stable aggregate so that our next crop has access to them. And when we do that, we start getting far greater efficiencies of our nutrient program. Okay? So this is the Slate test. Thanks, guys. And we'll just leave these up here, and we'll watch them for the rest of the morning. And Dave, Doug, are you going to come up and do
Sure.
the infiltration?
I don't care.
We'll talk about the infiltration here.
So,
Same two soils as your far right.
so we talk about, whenever we talk about the soil, we always talk about, the nutrients in it. We talk about the seed trench, a whole bunch of things about the soil, when in reality, probably the most important feature of the soil is that pore space, is the voids in between those aggregates that he talked about, isn't it? The most important feature is the nothingness of the soil, because that's what impacts water infiltration. That's what impacts air exchange. And so, if you've got a soil like these two, okay, same two soils here, what's that going to mean to those pore spaces? If we've got pore spaces, okay, and those aggregates collapse, just like here, those individual particles of sand, silt, and clay are going to collapse, and what are they going to do? They're going to seal over. So that's what we're going to show here. Same two soils. We got holes in the bottom here, holes in the bottom here.
To validate it, really,
I can't do it. Right?
you wouldn't want a government hand running this experiment.
No.
So
Come on, somebody. I need two people.
Come on up.
So again, understanding the impact of this aggregate stability and what it does, we're gonna come over here to, again, infiltration and what it's gonna do. So, okay, boys.
I would rather had this the first time.
First time. So immediately, you see the impact, okay? As those particles begin to collapse, they begin to immediately seal over, don't they? If you look at this one. They immediately start collapsing, all the pore space starts collapsing immediately. Whereas this one, it took the rain right in, didn't it? And that one's sitting there. Now you think about this, okay? We're actually have got this stacked up. If this was a field with even a little amount of slope, would that water be sitting there? It would have already been gone, wouldn't it? It would have already been gone. We're actually trying to create hydraulic force, pressure, to push that water through there, and it won't go. It will eventually soak through there, and in a rainfall event that was nice and easy and slow over many hours, we would get a lot of it soaked in. But how many of our rainfalls come nice and easy and slow over 2 days now? So if our average rainfall in the year is still the same, and half of them are coming in fairly significant events, we're giving up half or more of our water from those, right? And so that's the biggest part of it. Understanding this aggregate stability is the key to understanding infiltration. It's the key to understanding what happens out in a field. And we'll show a couple of pictures later that will solidify that a little bit, hopefully. Again, it still hadn't even made it through there. Do we need to verify there are holes in the bottom? Okay. I've been accused of that before.
Should you expect the water that drains through the healthy soil to be clear? Because people always point out, well, that's dirty. That water's dirty too. Do you ever get, how would you respond to a question like that?
Or
Keep it-
does it have nitrates?
There you go.
Yeah.
True, but keep in mind what we've done to this soil. We've disturbed it pretty heavily to put it in here. We've kind of chomped around the edges so that we didn't get preferential trail around the edges. So we've mechanically crushed some of these. So there's going to be a little detachment in this particular. That's why we like to follow it up with this next one here in a minute, where we just took it straight from the field with very little change or disturbance. But what we've found in this, now this is anecdotal, but when at the end of the day, this will finally drip through. There will be more at the end of the day here than here, because this has higher water holding capacity. Keep that in mind. That pore space.
There'll be more water. There'll be more water here.
There will, at the end of the day, I will predict there will be more water in this because it has lower water holding. And since that water has gone through very unstable aggregates, I've thrown nitrate test strips in these before. Now, we didn't know exactly what we were starting with, so it's not scientific, but almost every time I've ever done that, this one will actually have the higher nitrates, because that nitrate had nothing to hold on to. In this is active organic matter that is holding this soil together. So active organic matter has a lot more nitrogen in an organic state, a far more stable state.
Well,
Okay.
and it has more of the glues that you talked about from root exudates from biology. This would have, if we did a biological test on it, no doubt this would be a lot higher. So it's going to have more, and we'll get into more of the glues in a little bit, but it's going to have more secretions in the soil that help hold those particles together, hold those aggregates together. You know, it's just like, I mean, if we were all in a big windstorm, a big tornado, right, and we were all trying to stand there individually, some of us would get blown away. The skinny guys, right? The skinny guys would all get blown away. But if we were all locking arms and holding on to each other, our chances of withstanding that wind would be a lot greater, wouldn't it? And it's exactly the same with all these individual particles of soil. If they've got something that's sticky, that lets them stick to another clay particle, to another sand particle, to another silt particle, then that makes those particles a little bigger, and then you get bigger, and then you get bigger, and then they're stuck to each other. And so, from an erosion standpoint, that's the thing, and Barry and I were talking about it last night, that's the thing that we've seen, particularly in North Missouri. There's been a huge conversion on steeper land in North Missouri, and we see those first 2 or 3 years when they come in and till it, they don't get a lot of erosion because it's come out of pasture, it's got very stable aggregates, but 2 or 3 years of tillage breaks all those down, wipes all that out. And about the third year, if they get a rainfall advantage, boom, huge erosion occurs, okay? And so understanding that infiltration, that lack of infiltration right there, you're going to increase overland flow, you're going to increase all kinds of things.
One thing too, we're going to spend a lot of time the next 2 days and really the rest of the training, even the day-long sessions later, talking about systems too. I don't want to leave everybody with the belief that if you just no-till, all these things happen and water quality gets automatically better, especially nitrate. Because you will increase infiltration, but you may not have the whole package that actually keeps nitrate out of the tile. That's why we talk a lot about cover crops. And cover crops are such an important part of the overall system that's being promoted from a water quality standpoint. We need that whole package, that whole system working together to get the full benefit of what we're trying to talk about when we encompass the term soil health. Okay, so a lot of literature, scientific literature you'll look at will not tell you that no-till is necessarily a really silver bullet for water quality. But in a system, which there's almost very little research that's been done on the full system, but our edge of field water testing that we've put in some monitoring stations on fields that are under the full system are showing some very, very positive results. Okay, so we're going to talk systems when we talk about managing for soil health. A lot more than single practices. Okay.
And whenever you talk systems, there's trade-offs that occur. Farmers are, yield is obviously a very high priority. But we want soil health. So many times in that transition process, you gotta find the win-win. I need a couple of volunteers.
Can I ask a question about the last one?
Yep.
So, you tell me those are both the same soils, is that correct?
Yeah.
Just different programs, and you tell me that on the one that has more water in it now, if we did a nitrate test on that at the end of the day, it would have fewer nitrates in than the other one.
This one over here would have more nitrates. The poor soil would have more nitrates than the good soil.
So what's that tell us about a pre-sidegrass soil nitrate test between those two programs, and their accuracy and reliability?
In just regular corn, soybeans, pre-sidegrass nitrate has been inconsistent because it does not take into account, it's just the free nitrate that's in the soil at that moment. And nitrate is a continually moving target. So pre-sidegrass in these two, it's going to actually show a highly biological system, kind of deficient. It's going to actually give you a false reading that tells you you need more nitrogen than you really do because so much of your nitrogen is in an organic state. Pre-sidegrass, I've seen this even after manure, especially manure with cover crops together. The pre-sidegrass nitrate test indicates you need a lot more nitrogen than the actual field trial at the end of the season pans out.
So you're saying we should have different levels that we're trying to achieve under a system, the no-till system with cover crop than maybe with the
Pre-sidegrass nitrate testing was developed under a conventional system. The correlations and the rules and the formulas, that's why we started looking at some of these soil health tests that try to account for the biological delivery of nitrogen later in the season. And we're still working on it. It's not done yet. To know exactly where we're at on that.
In a really healthy soil, the nutrient need or nutrient availability is determined by the plant. The plant turns on and releases exudates that cause minerals, that cause the biologic part of it to make minerals available to the plant. So in a really healthy soil, that free available nitrogen is just not there because it's tied up in the system.
It's in a living thing.
It's in organisms in the soil. It's not in a measurable state that we're used to.
Now, imagine if we were all in an aggregate right here. There's a lot of nitrogen in this room. There's a lot of nitrogen, but it's tied up in protein and compounds. Same thing with a healthy soil. That's a very hard thing right now for us to, any scientist wants to be able to have an exact formula, an exact repeatable process. And biology just messes with that territory because biological systems are ever changing. So that's why we're looking at some of these soil health tests to try to figure out how can they complement our current knowledge of nutrient management.
Isn't that the essence of soil biology?
Yeah. And we know that temperature and moisture are huge influences on that biological system. Part of what I could throw a little bit under the bus, all of our soil tests, PDK, were developed under conventional tillage systems, very low biological activity. We're changing the paradigm, and we don't have all of the answers at this point in time. But right now, we're at a state where we gotta say, we've been working on getting a healthy soil, like this one right here from Mark and Dave's farm, we're gonna have a lot more nitrogen that's gonna be mineralized late in the season. And it makes it very difficult to do a test and say, you need to add, 82 pounds of nitrogen. The science isn't there yet. So anyway, I need to know. Kathleen, thank you for volunteering. Kathy, thank you for volunteering. It's great that people are willing to come up and help science. Okay, so this is a rainfall simulator test. So this is soil that we took. It's the Saybrook, and it was taken from a neighbor's field. We will disclose who. Let's just say its common history is work fall and spring and heavy tillage. The field that our soil pit is in, and the residue that we see is from cocktail mix that was planted last year after wheat. Okay, so this is going to answer some of these questions, I think, that we, because it is part of the system. One of the things that talked about aggregate stability and pore space. Well, what wasn't talked about was the residue that absorbs the energy of the raindrop itself. That's where we start. You absorb that energy. Then it's a matter of getting it into the soil, having that improved pore space to do that. So these were taken, they need to be dried, but then when you do them, they need to be somewhat moist in order to work properly. So I did this a couple of days ago. There's just a little bit of slope, but it's still probably 1.5%. Okay. We have holes in the bottom, so this is going to be our rainfall. So what we have is, how much do we have? 2 cups, 16 ounces. I want both of you to pick up one and just pour. Oh, wait a minute. I need to do some vertical tillage. So we're looking at what runs off, but more importantly, what goes through. Okay, we have runoff occurring on the conventional till slope. What? No runoff. But, both of them are receiving the same amount of rain. And, well, it rains, that's an act of God. He couldn't do anything about it. Well, changing management. And there would be no runoff. I don't know why this rainstorm is over again.
Well, this one's not exactly flat. I was looking at that, I kind of wanted it to be more level, but.
But anyway, the whole point.
It's actually received less rain, but more runoff.
So again, where we have improved pore space, we have the capacity of the soil to hold a lot more water. A lot more water. That will be, held there and maybe available later in the summer if it turns dry. So this can make a huge difference if it turns dry in July. July, August timeframe.
So it can hold it there for weeks to months, is that what we should be telling people?
Well, again, again, it depends on your mineralogy of your soil, you know, what's percent clay. Clay's gonna hold more, so it's got.
Cover.
Huh?
Surface cover will have a huge impact on evaporation.
Right. So this is, again, part of the system, keeping it covered, and within, we're also gonna reduce the temperature of the soil, which is gonna help the soil critters. And so imagine, this is just, you know, very small area, but we put this on a whole field basis, a whole farm basis. Huge difference in the results. What's leading that farm? Yeah.
A lot of guys that work with, they've either been no-tilling for my entire lifetime or aren't doing no-till at all. So, you know, when we do these experiments, how many years do you think it would take to change your soil aggregates to be able to like sustain your hold water better?
On a no, I'm gonna say, and believe me, 10 years ago, I thought continuous no-till was, that's the best we got. When we started adding covers, living roots, we took it up 2 notches.
Shows the filter strip, the woody perennial cropping system, and then the soybeans. No-till and cover crop. And then that flows through this filter strip into the area I just filmed, showing you the lack of sediment in the water, and into the pond. Well, we ended up getting 3 inches of rain, and that made the difference on getting it to flow through the pipe. This is about 3 hours later after it stopped raining. Water's still clear.